Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm here with Ms. Annie Fred Malone. She's the chief. I know he's the director of social development.
Something like that.
Right? But he's the chief social development officer, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Welcome to Spotlight. Good to see you. I ain't seen you in years.
I know. We're in this 2x4, but we don't see each other, right?
Ain't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Same
And Ms. Clarissa Benjamin Smith, welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you.
Okay, you got roots in the BVI, but you don't live here.
I was born and raised here, but I don't live here.
Okay. So you're here to do this workshop?
Yes.
Okay. So you are a social worker?
I used to be. I'm a psychologist now.
You're a
I used to be a social worker.
A psychologist.
So my background is in social work.
Okay. That's my fault, because I call everybody with psychologist, psychiatrist, I call everybody, I lump them all in social work.
Many people do that, many.
It's related. It's related.
Yes, it is, very much
But
so.
welcome to the Spotlight. And there's some very interesting things going on in social development, exciting things, because usually people think of the social development department as a welfare office. Just to be frank, people think that it's some place you go just to get a handout or to get help with whether it's a bill or child care or some assistance. Public assistance, but you really are beginning to tackle or have been tackling more important community issues, social issues, and of course, children that need homes. Children that need homes are an important issue.
Yes.
And how old is your foster care and adoptive parent program?
Well, I think the foster care program pretty much has its origin around 1964, pretty much when the department started. But what you've seen is that we've been developing as we go along. So we're at another phase now that we necessarily need to put some essential things in place, necessarily to be able to have a smoother operation and also be more accountable to the public in the process.
Okay. Is it a big program in terms of number of parents in partnering and a number of children involved? What is your data on?
Currently, the department has 32 children in foster care, and we have 19 foster parents. So, which basically means that we have more than one child often placed in one home. So and it ranges in terms of the type of foster placement that we have, because we have those that are court appointed, necessarily the matter goes to court, and the magistrate then puts them in the custody of the department, and then the department finds suitable housing, suitable homes for those. Then of course there are those that we have which are kinship foster care placements, which isn't necessarily ones that will go to court, but there are issues within the household, and we try to have the parents identify a suitable relative to be able to place the child, and we monitor those. So it varies.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you how the procedure. How does it work? How do you get a foster child? How does a child become a foster child? What's happening in the community that mitigate that circumstance?
Okay, under normal circumstances, or under unusual circumstances, I shouldn't say normal. Under unusual circumstances, something happens within the household and the system continually breaks down. Removal is not always our first option. Of course, we try to put things in place to try to mitigate whatever is happening. Sometimes that is not always possible. And when that is not possible, then we have to go to court to seek a care and protection order. Once we get that care and protection order, then the judge then places the child in the custody of social development, who then finds an alternate out-of-home placement for the child.
And these are children that are experiencing some form of abuse, child abuse, whether it be neglect, physical abuse, violence against the children, in the various forms that the violence would take,
Primarily.
whether it's sexual or physical. So, so this information comes to you, and you act, comes to the department, and you act, and you remove them. The courts decide to remove them from that situation and put them in a situation that perhaps is more wholesome.
Well, under the Children and Young Persons Act, 2005, primarily if we get a report, we are mandated legally to investigate that report. Once we investigate the report, if we find that the child is at risk or there's cause for alarm, then we go through our normal processes. And if the child has to be removed, then the court must sanction that removal.
Okay. And how is the foster care and adoptive parents working out? How's the program working out? You know, foster care has got a bad reputation globally, and that reputation perhaps comes necessarily from mass media, particularly what we see on television. It might
Right.
not even be the case,
Right.
but it's made to look that way by the dramas that we see played out on television with children in foster care and being abused in foster care. How are we handling that here, and are we having those types of situations?
Well, I think foster care primarily Edgewinker. Children will be children. We all have adaptation issues. And if a child has been with a parents from whatever, any parent and child who would run into some kind of challenges or difficulties, it is not for us to say whether or not that parent loves that child or that parent doesn't love that child. We're not the judge and the juries. But I believe if you were to ask a parent, they're going to tell you they love their children. The issue sometimes is that there are difficulties. There are different stressors that causes people to get into circumstances and situations. Once a child is placed into a new home, there's that adaptation phase. They have to adapt to the new environment, and that sometimes is not easy. So there's a lot of challenges that comes with that, necessarily for both the child and the foster parent. Overall, within the BVI, I think our systems, because it is so small, has worked relatively well for us, because most of what we try to do, we try to necessarily place the children within familiar environments, and not necessarily within strange environments that makes that transition much more difficult.
Okay. And what are some of the things, Clarissa, that Annie's talking about when you're talking about some of the challenges in the foster care system? What are some of the things that you are here to help to help the parents and the foster care program cope with?
Well, one of the first problem in any foster care program, and I don't think it would be unique to you guys, is recruitment, getting foster parents to commit. It's a huge commitment, and we do understand that. But it's special people that make the commitment, and we are just asking the community in general to step up and help us in terms of becoming foster parents. We do need foster parents. Foster parent is challenging, as I said earlier. But what is happening now is the training that we're trying to put in place to help to assist them, to give them the tools that's needed to do their job effectively, basically.
And so, what tools we find that parents need, foster parents and adoptive parents need, in order to help to deal with the challenges and deal with the stressors?
They need, number one, support. The program that I'm putting in place right now is mainly focusing on how they work effectively with the agency as in partnership. A lot of the times what we see is that foster parents work on one end and the agency on the other, and they butt head a lot of the times. I can't speak for the Virgin Islands because I don't know that well, but I know in the United States, having worked We butt heads all the time, and that's why we ended up putting this particular program in place to help us understand how to better work with each other. The goal, we're working towards a common goal, and that is to provide stability and nurturance for children.
Right.
And we can't be fighting amongst ourselves and do that effectively. So we have to know how to stay in our respective roles and respect each other in order to be able to provide the support, nurturance, and guidance for the children that are in need. So that's the first thing that we are going to look at when we're conducting this program, is how we can work well together. The second thing is tools in terms of management of behavior. How are the children coming into foster care have usually behavioral problems, emotional, psychological behavioral problems. A lot of the times what we saw in the past, we're trying to correct that now in the United States, but it's an uphill battle, it's a challenge, is that the parents weren't properly trained. They were trained, they met the required 20 hours that we asked them. But as society has grown, things have changed, the family dynamics have changed. Children are producing behaviors that we didn't see 30 and 40 years ago. We're seeing a lot more behaviors within families, and then within the family structure, and then in schools, it just carries on. Exactly. So now what we're seeing now that it's children are coming into foster care with these behaviors, we need to have our foster parents trained to meet those challenges, to help children manage their behaviors, basically. So those are two of the main focus. Communication would be the third one. How do you communicate? You have to be able to communicate with the child, you have to be able to communicate with service providers, and you have to be able to communicate with the agency if you are going to be an effective foster parent. So that is another tool that will be helping them to obtain.
And I think one of the other components also is, how do you fit the biological parent into all of this? Because foster care is meant to be a temporary arrangement. And as temporary as it is, the eventual goal is reunification, if it is possible. And we can't necessarily do all of this and then leave the biological parent out of the mix. So it's so essential then that we also find a way to incorporate the biological parent into all of what is happening.
But in many, again, I have my frame of reference is television, and we see many kids growing up in foster care to become adults in foster care, never reuniting with their parents, and some never even, are taken out at such a young age that they don't know the parents at all. Is that something that we are trying to prevent, based on what I'm hearing from you? Is that something that we're trying to prevent here, and we are hoping that when we take children away from their parents and put them in foster care, that at some point we are in a process of rehabilitating the parents as well? Is that simultaneous events that's happening?
Within our context, what we have seen in the past is a lot of our children get into foster care and they don't get out. I'm not certain that is the healthiest thing, because every child has the need to belong to something or to someone. And I think the thrust moving forward, necessarily, whether it is any out-of-home placement, is necessarily to have that out-of-home placement be for shorter periods than what we've been seeing in the past. And try to reunify as soon as we possibly can. Having said that, though, it is not always possible that we will be able to reunify some of them. So some of them, of course, will be in care, in out-of-home care, for longer periods than we had originally anticipated.
But certainly, if you are to reunite the child and biological parent, you would have to provide by necessity some kind of training for the biological parent,
of course,
given the fact of the circumstance,
of course,
that the children coming out of a dysfunctional home, that home will then need to be made functional in order for the child to go back to that situation. And so my question still remains: Are we doing something to help those parents?
Well, one of the things that we'll be also looking at with this training is concurrent planning. We'll be trying to implement that. And basically what that is you're planning for the return of the child, but you're planning for stability of the child. So it's not just, it's return to the parent, but what we find a lot of the times, if the parent, for example, is on drugs, have a mental health issue, sometimes they don't always plan with us within the time frames that we would like. For example, we look at 18 months in getting a child returned to a parent, idealistically. I've had cases before where children, like you said, grew up their entire lives in foster care, and we said that was not good enough. Children need stability. They need nurturance, they need stability. They need to be in, if they have to be in care, then they need to know when they'll be leaving. They need to go out, they need to know this is my home, this is where I'm going to graduate, this is where I'm going to leave and get married. They need to understand that. So we can't have them living in limbo. And that is sometimes what foster care provides, is that sense of being in limbo. Because mom can pop up any day and say, you know, I want my child back, and decides to plan, and then drop right back out of the picture again. So what we're trying to do is try to prevent that, in that while we're planning the return of the child to mom, then we're also planning for stability, maybe adoption. We're looking for adoptive homes, and that's where one of the things that why we're here also is not just foster home, we want foster and adoptive homes, so that we can look at children and say, if the person, the foster parent can't adopt that child, we can say, okay, these are the children that we have that we would like to see adopted, and plan towards having the child adopted, because the goal is stability and nurturance of the child ultimately.
What success are we having with adoptive parents? It seems as though that might be a more stable situation, that parents committed to adopting a child would know that this is a lifelong journey, commitment, and so you can feel comfortable giving more, as opposed to foster care where you know, you have to hold back on some emotion because you get too attached to the child, and then next thing you know, the child has to go back to the parent, or is going back to the parent. Right. So I mean, those are two dynamics that certainly come into play in these two different situations. So how is the adoptive parent program doing with, you know, people who want to have kids and have an opportunity to have kids?
Well, I'll answer from the local context. You know, unfortunately, in the BVI, adoption is a private matter. And I say that to say primarily that if a child is in foster care, we cannot place that child up for adoption because we do not have the legislation to support that. However, sometime in the very near future, what we will see is legislation kind of moving along that trend where it talks about denial of parental rights. And of course, that denial of parental rights will come on the heels of after you have done everything that you possibly can do to be able to reunify and rehabilitate, and that is not happening. And we're looking at the stability of the child, then adoption then becomes your most viable option at that particular juncture.
But I can imagine that we don't have many adoptive parents in the BVI. Am I wrong?
We have quite a few actually.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think on an average last year we did between 7 to 8 adoption reports. So because it's private, what necessarily would happen is that the department is not necessarily called on to prepare reports on the prospective adoptive parents. It's a matter that goes to court, high court, the judges make that decision, sometimes with our involvement, sometimes without our involvement. So we don't necessarily have a true picture in terms of we're counting statistics that comes into our office. We don't have a true picture in terms of the adoption scenario within the territory on a whole. But the new piece of legislation that we're looking at would necessarily put all adoption cases to the department. Everything must be accounted for, every person, must be accounted for through the department. So if a child is up for adoption, then the department then has that child. We do all the vetting. If it's a intercountry or adoption, then we do all that vetting country to country. So it puts more accountability for us to be able to really account for the children socially at the end of the day.
Okay. All right. So now we have this program is coming up on what's the date of the it's a workshop?
Yes.
On the 9th.
The workshop.
Yes.
And it's coming up when?
The 9th to the 13th of November.
And where is it going to be held?
The Red Cross building, right adjacent to the senior citizen building.
Yeah. And it's going to be how long? What was that?
So from 9 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon.
So
And
it's all day. It's what is it? How many days that was?
it's from the 9th to the 13th.
Okay.
So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
5 days?
Friday, yes.
Yeah, so it's a
And
5-day, all-day event.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're catering specifically to current foster parents, persons who wish to become foster parent. And I think there was another category I'm not on.
Adoptive parents?
Yes.
Yes. So persons who want to become adoptive parents can come to
foster parents.
Yeah, foster parents should come to the workshop because the training is going to be essential for you to be in that program. Is that what you're hoping to have happen? That anyone that wants to adopt a child, anyone that wants to participate in the foster care program needs to have this information.
The information is going to be
Is
vital.
this going to be a criteria?
Yes, it's going to be a criteria for everybody coming on stream now. And also, I think the other aspect of it is that we're moving towards certifying the homes, ensuring that the homes meet what we want them to meet. Because we're dealing with the lives of young children, and we have to ensure necessarily that, persons who have gone through the rigor of what we need them to go through, in addition to meeting the eligibility criteria, then the homes also must be suitable, persons must be certified in order to be able to provide that level of care that we're requesting.
And what are you looking for? Is it something that you're looking for in parents or in adults to be in the foster care system, families to be in the foster care system, and families to be in an adoptive program? Is there a criteria that parents have to meet? How do you make those choices? And how do you say who is going to be in the foster care program and who's going to be able to adopt?
Okay, well, we don't make the decisions in terms of adoption, so we'll focus on foster care for now. For the foster care program, every applicant must fill an application process. Once that application is filled, everyone must go through a background check, which is really a criminal background check to determine if there are any criminality. Then there has to be a physical, thorough medical physical. You can be 21. We don't choose persons under 21. You don't have to be married. You can be married or unmarried.
Single parent?
Yes.
You could be a single parent.
Yes.
Okay. And the environment that the child is going to go in, do you check that? Do you check out the environment, the home? What criteria does the home have to meet?
The home, it doesn't have to be a big, elaborate, fancy home with 5 bedrooms or anything. But the home must meet certain criteria in the sense that we don't have genders sharing the same room. There must be sufficient space that allows for privacy for each child also. And I think, but we do a thorough assessment before the child is placed, because I think our assessment period takes a whole process of up to between 3 weeks to a month between the application being filed and we vetting necessarily to ensure that the person meet the requirements that we are looking for.
Okay, and the workshop is going to be, I guess, intensive.
Yes, it's very intensive.
And you're gonna be talking about managing behavior, communications,
Problem
solving,
working in partnership with the agency, with birth parents, like Ms. Fred stated, with other service providers, mental health service providers, other social service providers, education, teachers, things like that.
And this is a one-time event, or this is a continuous training, or this is part of a whole structure that's being set up to manage foster care slash adoptive parent?
It's part of a structure, and it's not a one-time event. This is the first of what we're doing, but the department is actually going to be unfolding or unveiling some other programs that necessarily support foster parents in the process of fostering. Because like we said before, fostering is not an easy task, because when children come, they come with their own behavioral issues, and a lot of times you see the foster care arrangement breaks down easily in the initial, because children are so uncertain in terms of the environment. So they will go in and they will disrupt that environment before they settle. And I don't think a lot of foster parents don't necessarily understand that they bagged in for that part of it.
Yeah.
So the training that Mrs. Smith is going to be putting on necessarily will highlight a lot of those issues.
And prepare them for those,
and prepare them,
those
yes.
types of situations, how to manage the situations
Yes.
that come with troubled children or
Exactly.
children, like challenged children.
Yes.
We call that the honeymoon period.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything we missed out, we fall under the tyranny of the clock as usual. Have we gotten everything that we wanted to get in?
I pretty much think so. I would just appeal that if there are any persons out there who think that you have the heart, you have the space, you have the home, you have the love, that you want to become a foster parent, you can call the department at 468-3650, and you can register for the training. The training is from the 9th to the 13th at the Red Cross building.
That's great. Well, Sister Annie, it's good to see you. And
Always.
don't be a stranger. You know, you could come and hang out sometime, and there's a lot of things to talk about. There's social issues are developing all the time in the BPI. There's a lot to talk about, and certainly homegirl, Miss
Thank
Clarissa
you.
Benjamin Smith.
Thank
It's
you.
good to have you, and hope you have a good time while you're home.
Yes, I'm
And,
going to try to have some relaxation also.
And yes, and make it what's going to be a significant contribution to your country.
Yes.
Yes, it's always
Yes.
good to give back.
Yes, good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to come back with Ms. Cindy Roseanne and Ms. Janet Bryn, Tourist Board and CCT Unlimited, and we're going to talk about all upcoming events this November. This is Tourist Board Month, and all the fun that's going to be happening in the Virgin Islands. Don't go away. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands and CCT Global Communications.